The darkroom's red bulb glowed as investigators watched the faded image slowly emerge. A December snowbank behind a lone figure, her profile unmistakable even after decades sealed in evidence. The technician hesitated, breath held, for the photograph confirmed what the old case file only suggested, that long-buried winter truth now. If you like stories like this, make sure to subscribe and like the video. The Louisville winter of 1994 was defined by freezing rain, exhaust rising from idling trucks outside crowded malls, and storefront speakers playing carols over the same cracked sidewalks where the city posted its missing flyers. Holiday lights masked fatigue more than celebration, and in the center of it all, 22-year-old college senior Rebecca Carrow prepared to drive home from her seasonal retail shift at Jefferson Square Plaza. She had been studying journalism at the University of Louisville, living in an off-campus apartment decorated with tinsel she could barely afford, and talking often about her ambition to report local politics once graduation came. Her disappearance on December 22, days before Christmas Eve, never generated national headlines, but Louisville residents remembered her name for years, mostly because the winter never thawed the unanswered questions. Snow covered her last known tire tracks along the US-31 bypass, where traffic cameras malfunctioned from ice and police patrol cars circled without leads. The initial investigation relied on routine canvassing of parking lots, interviews with coworkers closing late holiday shifts, and property searches that turned back more frustration than evidence. The Plaza photo booth had been removed in 1999, long after the case went cold, but the strip of 4 undeveloped negatives inside a sealed locker at Metro Police Headquarters remained listed under Property Code 1194 RC. Detectives at the time noted them as potential material, but never processed them due to backlog, staff changes, and the influx of late-year robberies surrounding the New Year period. By 1995, the Carrow family kept her tree lights on every December in case she walked through the door again. Local press printed anniversary mentions with her college photo, her winter coat zipped to her chin in a campus courtyard. The quiet courthouse corridors where her missing persons report was filed held the heavy air of deferred closure. Volunteers distributed photocopied flyers at gas stations along Dixie Highway, and though several reported possible sightings near Shepherdsville, none aligned with her last confirmed location. The dimly lit parking lane where holiday shoppers rushed past, carrying bags and ignoring the lone sedan preparing to leave. At the peak of the early search, investigators reviewed mall security logs noting a faulty camera positioned near the western exit where Rebecca was last seen. Recordings were blurred, showing only shifting headlights and silhouettes. The break room time card confirmed her clock out at 9:18 p.m. Weather archives list freezing drizzle that transitioned to sleet, followed by a sudden drop below 20 degrees. Tire impressions could not be preserved due to salt trucks laying grit across asphalt. In January 1995, dive teams evaluated a retention pond behind the plaza, though heavy ice and sediment prevented comprehensive scanning. Witness recollections conflicted. One shopper believed she saw Rebecca scraping her windshield. Another described a man offering assistance, but no formal identification followed. Without forensic traction, the case file joined a stack of unresolved holiday disappearances that, in mid-90s Kentucky, centered primarily on runaway teens rather than college seniors with steady records and clear futures. The decades that followed delivered a routine sequence of impersonal reminders, property audits, unopened envelopes of volunteer tips, and aging Polaroids. Louisville modernized its downtown sectors, while the far corners of the suburbs remained unchanged. Brick storefronts weathered, Neon Christmas displays grew dimmer year after year, and the case's archive box, labeled C-482, sat beneath dated New Year DUI files and Thanksgiving burglary logs. It was a retired records clerk, during a December office renovation nearly 20 years later, who first questioned why the negatives were never processed during the original inquiry. New procedures allowed digital enhancement of analog media, and though the item list merely described them as Plaza booth negatives, unidentified female, the technician recognized Rebecca's profile instantly once the image surfaced in the red glow of the recovery lab. The photograph itself depicted her in the days just before she vanished, bundled in a thrifted wool coat with frayed cuffs, a string of blinking Christmas lights visible in the plaza window behind her. The detail that arrested attention, however, was not her expression but the partial reflection captured on the booth's glass. A man's sleeve, patterned with a store-specific uniform that the timeline placed in only one busy plaza diner. That diner, closed in 2003, had employed seasonal staff who often walked coworkers to their vehicles due to poorly lit lots. Employment logs from December 1994 still existed on microfilm, and one name matched the archived account of a brief interaction noted by a coworker, a holiday busser who offered ice-scraping assistance at closing time. The absence of sensational claims kept the process grounded. Investigators revisited employment records, shift notes, and archived address listings. The former employee, now in his late 40s, had relocated to a small Indiana town across the Ohio River. Contact was arranged formally through state jurisdiction channels. Records indicated no criminal history, no outstanding warrants, and stable employment. Yet the photograph's reflection contextualized his proximity to Rebecca during her final confirmed hours. A search warrant executed in accordance with updated digital privacy statutes recovered an old key fob linked to a 1992 sedan, consistent with witness reference. Forensic testing of the vehicle, retained by the man as a non-functional keepsake stored in a barn, identified trace fibers matching Rebecca's wool coat, preserved beyond expectation due to cold storage and minimal handling. Advances in DNA degradation analysis played a crucial role. Microscopic evaluation of trunk lining revealed low-level contact material consistent with secondary transfer during winter conditions. Combined with the undeveloped negatives, the fibers established presence, not violent action, but enough to warrant a detailed deposition. The former employee stated in written affidavit that Rebecca accepted a ride after her car failed to turn over in sub-zero conditions. Accident reconstruction experts posited that a skid along the ice-laden bypass could have sent the vehicle toward the drainage embankment beyond the patrol perimeter. Satellite mapping, paired with modern sonar, guided search crews to a submerged zone previously inaccessible. A rusted frame was located beneath decades of silt in late autumn, just before the 2020 holiday season. Inside, preserved by cold mud and sealed compartments, investigators confirmed the identification through dental comparison and student medical records. The manner of death was ruled accidental, consistent with hypothermic incapacitation following the crash. Though the man's failure to report the accident remained ethically troubling, the legal outcome adhered to Kentucky statutes of the period. No charge for unintentional failure to locate beyond immediate line of sight. Civil proceedings initiated by the Carrow family resulted in a settlement acknowledging negligence in not contacting authorities when his passenger disappeared from sight during severe weather. The city finally retired the missing case status. December lights returned to the Carrow home not as vigil but as quiet commemoration. Louisville's plaza, now remodeled, bears no marker of the decades-long absence, Yet the resolved case remains stored in courthouse archives alongside seasonal logs, a reminder of winter's silence and the importance of evidence preserved, even when forgotten. The conclusion in 2020 did not immediately settle the ambient weight of a case that had been threaded through Louisville's holiday seasons for more than 2 decades. Resolution in forensic terms rarely aligns with emotional relief, especially when the primary discovery occurs not through confession or investigative breakthrough, but through the quiet unveiling of photographic negatives that had waited longer than most careers in evidence storage. Louisville, in the winter following identification, maintained its annual light displays along Bardstown Road, though the tone seemed subtly altered, as if the city itself recognized the closing of a chapter written in ink the color of frost and old toner paper. The courthouse where the final paperwork was stamped remained a structure of brown brick and bureaucratic echoes, and its basement archive, where the negatives had first been misfiled, continued to house a labyrinth of outdated documentation, including Thanksgiving shoplifting logs and New Year disorderly conduct pages. The Carrow file, once occupying a space between drunk driving reports and faulty retail alarms, was now marked as resolved, sealed according to state protocol, and stored in a temperature-controlled cabinet with a notation indicating end-of-proceedings confirmation. Rebecca's apartment, long since renovated and cycled through new tenants, had been listed in early 2021 rental records without any reference to its historical weight. Former neighbors from the 1994 building recalled her polite demeanor, her focus on completing winter finals, and her habit of walking home past the decorative lampposts that mall management placed near the southern entrance during December. It was within those lamppost reflections that early investigators attempted to locate a figure or vehicle matching distant witness accounts, but fogged lenses and static-filled analog playback rendered the footage an indistinct blur. Only with the rediscovery of the photo booth negatives did the timeline regain structural integrity. The technician's first observation, that the diner uniform sleeve print matched that year's limited edition holiday pattern, effectively repositioned the narrative of her final night. While no criminal charges emerged from the investigation's closure, the factual reconstruction provided the Carrow family with a sequence of events that replaced the vacuum of disappearance with verifiable moments, documented environmental conditions, and a realistic endpoint that did not depend on speculation. Media attention circulated briefly, limited to regional papers and archived local news channels that specialized in revisiting unsolved cases during quiet winter programming schedules. Reports focused not on sensational elements, but on the procedural value of evidence retention and the long-term success of analog-to-digital conversion in cold case reevaluation. The plaza where she had last clocked out operated under new ownership, and most holiday shifts were now supervised with modern lighting, upgraded parking surveillance, and weather-responsive patrol coordination. December snowfall continued to collect across the asphalt, though snow removal patterns were now tracked digitally, eliminating the early 90s blind spots that contributed to initial investigative difficulty. The 1994 sleet storm, according to National Weather Service logs, ranked among the top 10 ice events of that decade, affecting travel routes and freezing over drainage slopes where, as later confirmed, her vehicle had descended beneath visibility. By late 2021, the expanded timeline of events was presented at a forensic conference in Lexington, emphasizing the intersection of seasonal conditions, under-resourced mall security, and archived photographic data. The booth negatives, preserved for decades without deliberate intention, demonstrated the importance of unprocessed media in missing persons cases. When displayed under controlled conditions, the image of Rebecca, coat draped, lights blinking faintly behind her, carried less the implication of danger and more the quiet ordinariness of a holiday shift worker pausing in a booth before driving home. The partial reflection that captured the diner uniform never indicated harm, only presence. Yet that fragment, authenticated against employment microfilm entries, anchored investigators to a witness who, while not responsible for her death, held critical information about her car's malfunction and the final route she likely attempted during icy conditions. In January 2022, Louisville's legal community reviewed the civil settlement terms with the Carrow family. The former employee's written acknowledgement of neglect, not malice, not coercion, but a failure to contact authorities after her vehicle slid from view is documented in courthouse transcription logs. Statutes from the mid-1990s did not obligate immediate reporting under such circumstances, particularly when visibility was reduced, whether impaired movement and the incident appeared accidental. The legal language reflected winter realities rather than dramatic misconduct. Poor traction, limited cellular access, and obstructed lines of sight. The settlement allowed the family to fund an annual journalism scholarship at the University of Louisville, awarded every December to a student who demonstrated commitment to local reporting. Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve, and New Year's periods had each held memorial significance for the Carrow parents. Their living room, once lined with missing posters and volunteer hotline flyers, gradually shifted toward quieter remembrance. A small tree remained each year, its lights no longer left burning through the night in vigil, but timed to accompany evening hours only. Records from local print shops confirmed that thousands of flyers were distributed in the winter months of 1994 and 1995, most produced on thin, curling paper that yellowed with age. Those flyers, their ink fading, were returned to the family following case closure. They remained stored in archival sleeves, organized chronologically by December date, beginning from the days before Christmas through the early New Year period when searching slowed under the weight of ice. The plaza renovations, completed in 2023, removed the corridor where the photo booth once stood. Tile replacements, LED displays, and updated storefronts obscured the location's previous identity. Only those who studied the case in professional or academic contexts could align the current walkway with the original blueprint showing the booth's placement near the west exit. In that exit lane, traffic signals now adjust automatically for weather. Digital scanning upgrades replaced the analog cameras that blurred Rebecca's departure, creating a visual clarity that did not exist when she left the plaza in 1994. The deliberate absence of memorialization on site reflects a municipal emphasis on forward movement, not erasure, but pragmatic infrastructure. For Louisville's Cold Case Division, the successful resolution reinforced procedural discipline. Investigators cited the case in training sessions, where new officers learned to treat overlooked evidence not as dead ends, but as dormant resources awaiting future technology. The negatives, once cataloged without urgency, represented a flawed yet ultimately correctable moment in evidence handling. Had they been processed in the mid-1990s, the uniform reflection might have prompted earlier deposition, but without sonar mapping and digital restoration decades later, the crash location would still have remained beyond reach. By winter 2024, the archive entry listing her case included final dispositions, chain of custody confirmation, and release clauses. Seasonal radio programming in Louisville continued to play classic carols over shopping districts, but the melancholic resonance that once shadowed the holiday period for those who remembered her absence had diminished. The scholarship recipients attend classes in updated campus buildings, unaware that the award's origin traces back to a December evening spent under neon garland and freezing sleet. For the Carrow family, closure arrived not with triumph but with quiet certainty, the kind that aligns with courthouse signatures, NOAA weather data, fiber analysis reports, and a single photograph developed under red light decades after it was taken. Holiday months still pass in Louisville with their familiar sequence of parades, window displays, and midnight church services. Yet beneath them lies the archived acknowledgement that even the smallest preserved artifact, a faded negative strip sealed in a box beneath outdated New Year logs, can eventually return a lost winter to its rightful place in the record. The winter following the civil settlement marked the first December in which the Carrow residents no longer carried the somber weight of unresolved absence. The wreath on the front door remained modest, its pine needles replaced annually, though no neighborhood vigil gatherings occurred and no late-evening candlelight arrangements framed the porch. Louisville's municipal calendar noted no official commemoration. The case, though concluded, did not become a symbol or cautionary headline, but remained a procedural success housed within courthouse ledgers and annual forensic summaries. Local reporters revisited the story only briefly, mostly during slow news periods between Thanksgiving and New Year's, where a single column might mention the importance of archival review and cold storage accuracy. The tone across all coverage stayed restrained, factual, and free of dramatic invention. Even university publications referenced Rebecca primarily through the scholarship awarded each December, attaching her name to academic continuity rather than disappearance. In the cold case department, a new generation of analysts reviewed the Carrow documentation sequence, tracing each file step from the original December 22, 1994 missing report through the resolutions filed in the early 2020s. The timeline served as an instructional tool in verifying the endurance of physical evidence, particularly during winter months when environmental conditions threatened preservation. Those original negatives, exposed and sealed before the digital age, demonstrated the forensic value of properly maintained analog storage, especially during prolonged periods of inactivity. The Red Room development that revealed the reflective sleeve image became a visual reference in training manuals for digital enhancement procedures. Interns studying the case noted how a single detail, mere inches of patterned fabric, linked to microfilm employment lists, and eventually to a deposition that transformed conjecture into verifiable chronology. The plaza itself continued to function as a retail corridor through multiple holiday seasons. Parking lots were resurfaced, traffic lines repainted, and snow-clearing logistics automated. Where shoppers once hurried between dimly lit lanes in the final rush before Christmas Eve, upgraded lighting now minimized winter blind spots. Newly installed weather-responsive LED fixtures compensated for seasonal storms, reducing the risk of visibility failures like those that occurred during the 1994 freeze. Louisville's Department of Transportation, in a technical memo released in 2023, cited the Carrow case among examples requiring improved snow event response planning. While not a direct cause of policy change, the case lent historical context to prior system vulnerabilities, malfunctioning cameras, salt trucks moving too late, and embankment areas not surveyed during ice accumulation. The Indiana deposition from the former diner employee remained sealed by court order, accessible only under formal research request. Though his acknowledgement of events provided closure, No further commentary was issued publicly. The lack of sensational detail prevented the case from entering the realm of televised reenactments or late-night dramatizations. Instead, it remained rooted in the language of investigative review, accident reconstruction, and environmental analysis. Cold water submersion data from the crash site confirmed that the vehicle's containment had been influenced heavily by sediment layering and winter silt density, factors that preserved interior materials while obstructing sonar detection during the mid-90s search. It was the acoustic imaging advancements of the late 2010s that finally penetrated the submerged zone, mapping its irregular contours and identifying metallic disruption beneath layers of compacted runoff. By the following new year, Louisville City Archives updated the digital index system, prioritizing cases with unscanned film evidence. The backlog included dozens of holiday period incidents extending back to the early 1980s. The Carrow case served as the motivator for a renewed push in analog preservation conversion, ensuring no further decade-long oversight occurred because of storage misclassification. Forensic auditors noted that the specific cabinet housing the negatives had undergone at least 3 reassignments over 25 years, contributing to their forgotten status. The rediscovery during office renovation, therefore, occurred not through investigative pursuit, but through procedural reorganization, a reminder that resolution often results from meticulous administrative review rather than intuitive leaps. The emotional impact, while subdued, settled most heavily in the quiet spaces of Louisville's residential districts. Residents who remembered the 1994 flyers spoke less about tragedy and more about the endurance of unanswered winters. Those December nights, when car radios played Carol of the Bells over salted side roads and pedestrian breath hung briefly in cold air, were now understood with clarity rather than speculation. The city's approach to holiday season disappearances evolved accordingly, integrating multi-agency communication protocols and updated seasonal search grids that accounted for ice-related travel deviations. Predictive modeling software, implemented in 2025, incorporated historical cases to align search efforts with likely environmental hazard zones, including embankments, drainage slopes, and unlit bypass stretches similar to the area where Rebecca's route concluded. The university community maintained its own quiet remembrance. The journalism department displayed a simple brass plate beneath a row of alumni achievements, marking her not as a case, but as an interrupted academic path. Students receiving the annual award seldom pursued cold case reporting directly, yet the scholarship's December presentation aligned them with the same winter rhythms that once punctuated her absence. Snow continued to fall across campus lawns each year, softening concrete walkways and muffling late-semester chatter, but no public ceremony acknowledged the connection between weather and memory. Administrators allowed the nameplate to remain understated, in keeping with the family's request for modest representation. Accessibility to the digitalized evidence became a controlled feature of Louisville's training infrastructure, not a matter of public curiosity. The photograph, originally emerging from chemical darkness under red light, was transferred to secure server storage with limited viewing permissions. It gained no artistic or symbolic interpretation, functioning purely as procedural evidence. The diner sleeve reflection, however, continued to appear in analytic discussions about the forensic relevance of background elements and incidental visual data. Trainee investigators learned to interpret such peripheral imagery not as narrative embellishment, but as structural support for timeline verification. Even at the plaza, no commemorative marker appeared. The walkway, renewed tile by tile, displayed seasonal promotions rather than historical plaques. Christmas decor still arrived each year, synthetic garland, commercial ornaments, and timed sound systems playing instrumental carols over the shopping flow. But none of these installations acknowledged the December in which her departure went undocumented by cameras blurred through ice. Urban planning committees treated the site as active economic terrain, not a memorial space. Local sentiment echoed the decision. Closure did not demand public monument, only accurate record. Thus, by the completion of the 2024 holiday cycle, the Carrow case existed in Louisville not as rumor or cautionary tale, but as a finalized archive entry. Snow continued to fall, shoppers continued to rush toward year-end sales, and freeway salt trucks continued to cut tracks through winter accumulation near the same bypass corridor reflected in original investigative maps. The courthouse maintained its quiet halls, the archive cabinets maintained their controlled climate, and the December air maintained its seasonal stillness. In this environment, resolution meant not erasure, but a calibrated return to routine. The family observed Christmas with measured calm, New Year with reserved acknowledgement, and the anniversary of her final shift with the understanding that, though decades passed before her photograph surfaced, the record now aligns winter conditions, forensic recovery, and procedural patience into a single confirmed narrative. In the years that followed the finalized disposition, the Carrow file no longer circulated through active review cycles, but remained quietly referenced whenever Louisville's forensic division reassessed older winter disappearances. The case became emblematic not of violence or concealment, but of environmental consequence, evidentiary patience, and the slow, administrative rhythm through which closure eventually emerged. Training modules developed for incoming analysts included the sequence not as dramatic caution, but as methodical demonstration, that a December night, a malfunctioning car, and an ice-slick bypass could produce decades of uncertainty without any criminal orchestration. Louisville's cold storage room, where rows of evidence lockers were now RFID tracked and quarterly audited, held the original negative sleeve in a climate-calibrated compartment. The strip itself, once forgotten in the back of a wooden drawer beneath New Year arrest summaries, remained unchanged, archival, inert, significant only because of what its eventual development allowed investigators to reconstruct. The plaza's transformation continued through subsequent holiday seasons. Retail turnover followed predictable economic patterns, and the December calendar regained its usual visual saturation. Red and white window decals, artificial snowflakes suspended from ceiling beams, and the familiar commercial tones of midwinter sales. Employees who staffed late shifts in the new decade rarely knew the plaza's prior association with her final recorded exit. They parked under LED-lit lanes that did not flicker, pushed carts through heated vestibules that did not collect sleet trails, and left work without the dim camera blind spots that once obscured her departure. The absence of overt memorial also meant that the space avoided romanticized reinterpretation. It was neither haunted by mystery nor burdened by retold speculation. It was simply a retail zone with improved infrastructure and a quiet, resolved entry buried in legal archives. In Louisville's municipal offices, December always carried additional clerical weight. Holiday-related incidents, winter travel disruptions, and end-of-year reporting deadlines merged into a dense administrative cycle. That rhythm remained unchanged, though file clerks who had served long enough to remember Rebecca's missing flyers occasionally paused near the cabinets housing the sealed case. Their recollections were not emotional outbursts but measured acknowledgments of time, a reminder that careers had advanced, city budgets had shifted, forensic technologies had evolved, and yet one strip of negatives had remained untouched through all those transformations, waiting for a protocol update and a renovation that finally brought it forward. Case resolution did not rewrite their memories of the 1994 winter, but contextualized it, returning what had been abstract loss to a defined event with a date, a route, and a confirmable accident. Journalistic treatment of the case, when it did reappear in quiet December features, remained strictly procedural. Articles framed the resolution as evidence of the incremental nature of long-term investigations, rather than the dramatic intervention that television formats might prefer. Autopsy references were limited to determinations of accidental hypothermic decline and physiological complications consistent with cold submersion. No language suggested malice, abduction, or prolonged distress. Instead, coverage emphasized the freeze index that week, the rapid icing of overpasses, and the bypasses sloped embankment where visibility plunged into near-total darkness. The environmental report that accompanied the 2020 recovery cited wind chill factors that reduced response viability, underscoring the role of weather rather than human intention. For a city accustomed to winter headlines involving traffic stalls and power flicker warnings, the conclusion fit seamlessly into the meteorological history of Louisville's holiday season. The Carrow family's adjustment to closure did not unfold in public view. Thanksgiving gatherings resumed without empty chair symbolism. Christmas morning resumed without vigil boundaries or extended porch lighting. New Year's Eve transitioned from reflective pause to standard transition between calendar years. Boxes of archival flyers, once brought out in December for reprinting and distribution, remained sealed and stored in a household attic. They were not discarded, simply retired from function. Each sheet preserved a snapshot of mid-90s design, block font, grainy photo reproduction, hotline number in bold below a hopeful descriptor. They exist now as historical artifacts rather than active community tools. Their silence aligns with the family's chosen manner of remembrance, quiet, focused on her identity rather than her absence. The scholarship fund continued annually with minimal publicity. Recipients, ranging from investigative reporting students to local beat writers, submitted winter-term essays, unaware that their December awards carried the echo of an unresolved ice corridor finally located after decades. The Carrow name, attached to academic persistence rather than disappearance, circulated in the controlled environment of campus grant records, free of dramatic association. This alignment with her original ambition to pursue journalism anchored the memory in continuity rather than interruption. In archival terms, her name became an origin point of opportunity rather than a placeholder for permanent uncertainty. Within the forensic community, the case contributed to a broader reevaluation of holiday season disappearance protocols. Analysts scrutinized the intersection of consumer rush periods, reduced daylight, and severe weather impact on early investigative sweeps. The 1994 search perimeter, limited by analog lighting grids and poor vehicle traction, became a comparative study for improved winter grid mapping. Sonar imaging procedures, refined in subsequent years, included specific parameters for sediment-heavy embankments adjacent to urban retail zones, environments previously deprioritized due to assumed low concealment risk. The Carrow map overlays, once two-dimensional photocopies taped to detective desks, were now digitized with layered terrain modeling and ice formation indexing, demonstrating what could have been accessed had winter recovery tools existed 3 decades earlier. In the city's public memory, her disappearance remained respectfully quiet. Louisville's December identity, church bells echoing over frost-coated rooftops, historic brick storefronts outlined with rope light, early dusk settling over the Ohio River, absorbed the case not through legend but through documentation. Holiday parades proceeded, tree lighting ceremonies continued, and the same plaza where seasonal workers hurried to punch out before sleet returned maintained its role as a commercial anchor rather than contemplative landmark. Winter in Louisville neither memorialized nor sensationalized her. It simply progressed, carrying with it a documented understanding of one night in 1994 when freezing rain reshaped a route and paused a family's certainty for more than 2 decades. The final closure entries in the legal archive reflect no dramatic punctuation. Instead, the concluding line affirms identification, cause classification, and evidentiary completion. A notation clarifies that the case requires no further review. In the sterile formatting of courthouse records, that line concludes the longest chapter of her story. The courthouse, with its echoing stairwells and end-of-year fluorescent hum, holds the final confirmation without ceremonial framing. Louisville moves forward, winter after winter, with snow that falls predictably, with lights that switch off after closing hours, and with the redacted simplicity of a case resolved by patience, preserved evidence, and the unplanned persistence of one unprocessed photograph waiting silently in the dark until its moment of clarity arrived.